Okay, we are jumping into this week's topic, talking about YouTube, because so many of you have asked, and we even did, this recent video on how to upload your podcast RSS feed to YouTube and what that looks like. So if you have not watched or listened to that content, make sure you go check it out. But YouTube is like, it's the topic that everyone has. And I think it's one of those things that for a long time, there's many of you that have been audio only and you've gotten to, because I know this audience, right? I know that a lot of you started listening to this podcast or, watching us on YouTube. And then you're like, okay, great, Crystal, help me start my podcast. Help me start. And then you started. And then now you're like, okay, what's next? Like, what's my next step? So while today could be an episode for the beginners, I'm really going to be talking to those of you that have already settled on your idea. Maybe you've been creating content for a while and now you're kind of foraying into the YouTube space. But if you're brand new to content creation and you're just wanting to start a YouTube channel, you can also, take what we say today with a grain of salt, but it is going to be more directed at someone who already knows their ideal audience. You've been creating content somewhere online and you're not in that messy middle of still trying to figure it out. But we are going to be focusing so much on YouTube. So whether you're starting one in 2025 or you're looking at, adding in that video component to an already existing podcast, this episode is for you. So let's get right to it. Hello, and welcome back to the Prophet Podcast. If we have not met, I am your coach, Crystal Prophet. I'm also a content strategist, and today I'm going to be your amateur YouTube expert because I'm not going to label myself as the aforementioned YouTube expert. She has all the answers. She does not. Okay, let me just throw that out there. I do not have all the YouTube answers, but as someone who's created thousands of videos at this point on YouTube and been doing this for a while, I do have a lot of things figured out that could be, questionable for podcasters or the top questions that people are coming up with. But I want to read specifically the question that stemmed this whole conversation today and give a shout out. So shout out to Kylia. So Kylia has been in our podcast community for a while. She has the Herbal Womb Wisdom Podcast, and she says videos for YouTube, but also maybe first steps. So let me take a step back. I had posted a question that said, what do you want to talk about? And that's where she just jumped right in. Videos for YouTube. She raised her hand and said, this is my question. Can you address this? Okay, let's go back to it. She says, videos for YouTube, but also maybe the first steps to moving my podcast to YouTube. From the very beginning, since I've never used it. I've been wanting to do that for a while, but I literally know nothing about it. I think that I need to upload videos in order to get somehow verified. That's as far as I've gotten. Also, maybe how to vet a good podcast editor, or should I do it myself? I do all my editing, haven't even used a script because I'm so used to it. And there's some kind of hurdle around the feeling of getting uncomfortable or feeling comfortable handing that off. So Kylia, thank you so much for your question. And this is all normal. This is all normal. Even my video editor, Jay. So Jay's here. We're going to do a quick shout out to Jay Sutton because he has been editing my videos for YouTube for almost a year at this point. We have been working together from doing short form videos, long form videos, videos for sponsors. We've done a lot of content together, and it was hard for me personally because it's always that creative freedom, right? Where you're worried, and is the person I'm working with going to interpret what I am envisioning, what I'm imagining, and bring that to life? Or am I going to be basically setting money on fire because the person that I hired to do this isn't doing it and they're doing all these revisions? I get it. And I've actively worked through these things in real time. So I can tell you that it is a challenge, but it is 100% doable. Now, thankfully, because Jay and I have been working together for so long, it's I can just say something pretty vaguely and he interprets it exactly how, like he speaks my language. All right. At this point, once you start working with someone, you can absolutely kind of speak the language and understand each other in a way that makes that working relationship so much more dynamic and just a richer experience. But you only get that with time, unfortunately, right? Working together, being clear, like having disagreements on, well, I think it should be this way. And then someone that you can actively, I believe, hire, and then they give you a little pushback because they're the expert. They're like, well, that's great. I love your creative ideas, but also I've seen this other thing work, or I know because they're more experienced at it. So it is, you have to let go of some control, relinquish some of that responsibility, hand that off to an expert and let them deal with it. But we'll get more into the hiring in a second. I want to go back to kind of the higher level pieces of your question, and then we'll break them down. But let's get into the basics of getting your podcast onto YouTube, right? So I already mentioned we have a video I want you to go check out. It's all about your podcast, uploading it to YouTube. So if you haven't already uploaded your RSS feed, start there, right? This is not technically video, but it's a way for you to get going, get your actual YouTube channel up and running. And then we can talk about actual video footage. The second is strategies for YouTube success without being overwhelmed. We're going to talk about that. Then we're also going to talk about the pros and cons of hiring an editor versus doing it yourself. So you ready? Okay. We're going to dive into this. So like buckle up because we're going on this journey. It's going to be a ride, but it's going to be great. So the first thing that I want to talk about is why move your podcast to YouTube. So the thing that I see when it comes to YouTube, I look at the population, the demographics that I have in my family, right? So I have my dad to my kids. And if you ask them, like, where do you consume content when you are looking for a solution to your problem, an answer to a question, or you just want to know how to do something you're vaguely interested in, where do you go? They're going to tell me YouTube for my kids, YouTube for my dad. And I gotta be honest, my husband's the same way. I'm the same way. I may start with like a Google search or asking ChatGPT first, but it's all kind of the same. It's all a relevant topic to go to YouTube to look for answers. And especially when it's something that needs to be like, oh, I need a demonstration of that, or I want to have someone actually explain it to me like in a video. I don't want to just read something. I want to watch it or listen to it. Then that's where people are going. So this is my argument, and will continue to be my argument for YouTube, is that it is a search engine. It is where people go to find answers, and you could be the solution to their problem with your content. So that's like high level why I love YouTube, and I'm going to keep publishing there. It's huge audience, huge reach, search potential, SEO. Like I could just keep going on and on why I love it so much, but it also helps your audience connect with you on a deeper level, because if you have only, like I'm going to challenge you actually, if you're listening to this in the audio only version, I encourage you, like look at the timestamp where you're watching or where you're listening right now, hop over to YouTube and watch the rest of this episode and let me know if it changes how you feel about me as a creator or someone that's just only listened forever. Because like I said earlier, Jay's incredible. He does a great job of like adding visuals and making this like more compelling than just a talking head. But I think that we have a deeper connection, even if it were just a basic video of me not doing anything other than talking. Because if you're watching me, you're like, gosh, Crystal uses her hands a lot. I do. I use my hands. I'm actually standing up today. So you would only see this on the visual one. I usually sit down and I'm like, have my whole setup, whatever. Like I have a standing desk. So I'm standing up today because there's a lot of energy. I had my afternoon coffee. Like I'm ready to go for today's episode. And you don't get that just listening to me on a audio only podcast. So we can have a deeper level connection just from like, I'm looking right down the barrel. I'm looking directly into the lens. I'm making eye contact with you because it is that important for me to connect with you in that way. And I think that it's really important for you to try to do this with your audience as well. If you can, I'm going to push you out of your comfort zone in 2025 to do this a lot more. But start getting familiar and comfortable with doing it because it can have a much bigger impact on your audience. All right. So I want to talk about monetization. We've talked about this before. YouTube was one of the first places that I monetized, and it did not take me. I mean, I need to go back to the actual timeline. I don't remember how long it took me to get 1,000 subscribers, but it was not, it wasn't longer than a year, I don't think. And it was something that I still make money every single month from YouTube. You know, even if it's not a ton of money, right? It's not thousands and thousands of dollars, but it's money that's paying for a subscription that I have for a tool. And so it's worth it to me to keep creating YouTube content because it also pays me a little bit. Whereas with some of my other platforms where I create content, it doesn't do that. Okay. And then I want to bust some myths about putting content on YouTube and what that looks like for a podcaster, because the first one is you don't need to be a YouTube expert to get started. You really don't. I started creating videos on my phone. I'm trying to remember if I had an iPhone 11 or 12. I remember I got excited whenever like that I got that first, I think it was a 12, and I started recording videos and I edited them with iMovie and I put them on YouTube. That I kept it so simple. The audio really wasn't even that great. So if you were watching around like 2020, like 2021, I remember when I got my newer phone, but the audio was okay. The video was better, but I mean, it wasn't super fancy. So you don't have to be fancy. Like, don't sit there and tell yourself, well, I can't do video because I'm not fancy. You don't have to be fancy. We're throwing that out there. That's myth number one. The second one is you don't need fancy equipment from day one, meaning you don't have to invest in a DSLR camera. You don't have to have a fancy podcast mic. You could just do this from your phone. All right. Just get started. That's all I'm asking you to do is just get started. You could just set up your phone while you're recording your audio only podcast. Like, what do you think about that? Like, people will tell me, well, that's not really fancy. Like, why would I do that? And I'm like, why would you not? Why would you not? To put it out there and put it up? Yeah, it's going to be an extra step, but it's also going to give you that much more reach with your content. So just throwing that out there. And I'm actually going to give you an actionable tip. When I was planning this, I wanted to make sure that we had some things that you could take action on from this episode. But what I wrote down is if you're overwhelmed, start by uploading your audio episodes with a static image. This is the podcast RSS feed that I was talking about, or simple graphics before moving to full video production. So go back and watch that video. I've already talked about it. We're going to link to it in the description, but there is the podcast RSS feed. Take your audio only, put it on YouTube. That's your first step. If you have not done that, pause this now, go watch that video and do that, because this is the first thing that you should do. The next thing we talk about is moving from podcast to YouTube. So first thing, set up a YouTube channel. If you have not done that, you got to do that first. Prep your first video. Like, are you going to just record with your phone next to you? Are you going to use a computer? Are you going to use Riverside? Are you going to do StreamYard? Are you like, what are you going to do to record this thing? And then uploading it and optimizing it. So the last part is probably going to be the longest one, because that's where it can be like, oh, I got to do a thumbnail. I got to do the tags. And this is where I would lean on, and I'm going to recommend going and finding a YouTube expert that makes sense for you, because that is the learning process. Like, that's the learning curve. I mean, I could sit here and tell you what I do, and in Podcasters Connect, if you have additional questions, this is where we can hash them out and talk about them. If you're wondering what Podcasters Connect is, this is our free community that you can join, where we do so many things. We answer questions in there. We have monthly calls for premium members. We do content audits for premium members. So there's a free version and then there's a premium version of our community, but we want you to come hang out with us, because this is where we talk about these things. Like, if you want me to do a walkthrough on how I upload my YouTube videos, cool. We'll do that in our community. But I think that going back to prepping your first YouTube video, whatever your next episode is, just set up a camera. I don't care, any camera, record yourself. It's going to be awkward, just like the very first time you recorded a podcast episode, but we lean into awkward, right? We don't run away from it. We lean into it and say, okay, how can I make this even better next time? Or what can I do with what I already have? That's what I want you to really do. All right, the next one is talking about how to vet a good podcast editor. So Kylia, again, this is me talking directly to you and letting you know I had the same discomfort. It's why it took me so long to hire an editor. The thing that I had going for me in meeting Jay was we met in person at an event very briefly. It's not like we sat down and we talked for hours and I was like, oh my gosh, like, where have you been all my life? Like, we should work together. It really wasn't like that. How it unfolded was we met at a PodFest event here local in Houston. And then later on, I remember when he introduced himself, he said he was a videographer and he does video stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. So afterwards, I remember there was like some follow-up something. And I was like, oh, wait, who was that Jay guy? Let me go look him up on Instagram. I looked him up on Instagram. I DM'd him. We kind of talked about rates and what I was looking for. And I was like, I'm still not ready. I was totally dragging my feet. He's probably laughing as he's watching this, as he's editing this. He's like, oh my gosh, this is like, yeah, she was dragging her feet. I was dragging my feet because I was still a little uncomfortable with outsourcing this. I thought, do I have the money to do this? Do I have the budget? Can I consistently pay someone to do these things? I had all these questions as the creator. And I just remember thinking like, what if it doesn't work out? What if our visions don't align? Or what if there's like this creative differences? And so instead of worrying about all those things, what I did, and I think that it benefited both Jay and I so much, is I told him right up front kind of the expectations that I had. I said, okay, here's what I want. And here's what I don't want. And this is our brand identity. Here's like the basics, like the color, like fonts and like all of our like brand identity things that you would see visually, like use these colors, not those colors, use this font, not that font, and I really got clear. It was just in a Word document or a Google Doc. I got very clear on like, do this, don't do that. Here's our stuff. Here's our story. Here's our audience. I gave him a lot of backstory on which you will have all of this, right? You will have all of this, Kylia, because I know you've gone through profit podcasting. You've been podcasting for a while. You know who your audience is. It's just about taking those visual components and putting them together. Put it into a simple Google Doc. Have ChatGPT help you do this, right? You could even point the bot to your previous podcast episode or your episode description and say, hey, this is my podcast. I want to hire a video editor and this is my content. What are the do's and don'ts that I should share with them? Or what are the pieces that I need to share with the video editor so we don't have creative differences right off the bat? Like there's so many different ways that you can really hash this out with ChatGPT or whatever AI you want to use. But I think it's really important that you get super, super clear on what your content should be and what it shouldn't be, because then it makes that rocky road a little less rocky when you're trying to work with someone. And just be prepared. You may have to work with multiple people. I know that sucks. I hate saying that, but it does happen. Like I hired multiple virtual assistants before I landed with Mike, who I work with today. And I mean, it took a second for us to figure out like, okay, what do we do? What do I outsource? Again, I was trying to be a control freak, so it took me a second. But now, I mean, I'm pinging him all the time. I'm like, hey, please take this off my plate. Please do this. Please work on that. And that only comes with the comfort level. So if you've never hired anybody, just know up front, it probably is going to be a little bit difficult, but lean into that and maybe have whoever you're working with submit a sample project or show you previous things that they've worked on. Or you can also in your document submit to them, say, these are the videos that I love, or this is the style that I'm going for. If you have a creator in mind, they don't have to be in your industry, but they create similar content to what you want to create. Like put all of that in there, because the more references that you can give them, the more likely they are to succeed, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to set them up for success and make it to where it's easy for you to create the content in a way that you're going to give them, the best content and give them the right opportunities to get it right the first time. So you're not just going back and forth, like, that's right. No, do this, do that. Like, because it's insanity after a while if you're doing that every single time. So I'm going to go through a few of these, like kind of quick 3 tips that I have for you. Okay. So how to vet a good podcast editor / video editor. 1, why consider hiring an editor, right? It saves you mental time, or saves time and mental energy, allows you to focus on creating your content, and it actually gives you that professional quality that can really elevate your brand. I love what Jay creates for the podcast. It is so high quality. It is done on time. Like, so now I'm just going to be bragging on Jay for a second because it's always done. Like, there's never a question of like, oh my gosh, like the video's due tomorrow and like I haven't heard from him and like he ghosted me or whatever. Like, that just doesn't happen because I hired a professional to do this. And again, it may take you a second. I always tell people to ask for referrals. Like, if you know someone that knows someone that knows a great video editor, like, hey, who's your video editor? Hey, who's it? I don't care, Jay. Like, he'll put his stuff up here. Reach out to Jay. Like, if you're looking for a video editor. But at the end of the day, like, you want that high level, high quality content because you're putting your best foot forward. And that's what I recommend you do if you're going to go the route of hiring an editor. The next one is DIY versus hiring pros and cons. Okay. The pros and cons of doing DIY are hiring an editor. So DIY, right? For DIY, you're going to have free and you can control every single little detail. But let me tell you this. I was ready to pull my hair out when I was spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours editing video. That's not my strong suit. It's still not my strong suit today. I will do it if we are in a pinch, but oh my gosh, I hate it with a passion. Hate it with a passion. I do it, but no. Jay is so much better at it. He's so much faster at it. And I just like, goodbye. So that's my pros and cons of doing DIY. The other part of it is it can be time consuming, especially if you're a perfectionist. So I wouldn't even say I was so much of a perfectionist as I was just trying to fix some audio, like weird audio and video issues that happen from time to time that took me forever to just figure out, like, why is this off? Like, what is wrong with this? So it wasn't even about perfection. It was just trying to get it to a decent video. And I think someone that has that professionalism and background, they can just do it so much faster. And the other piece is if you're looking for a tool to explore with this, highly recommend Riverside, highly recommend Descript, like even Adobe Premiere. Like if you're looking for something really fancy, then you could go that route. It was like super custom. Again, these things have a learning curve, and I would just lean more into a tool that's going to let you do it faster, Riverside, Descript, or going the route of finding someone who knows how to do these. So like I record, let me just tell you the quick workflow that Jay and I have. So I record in Riverside. He has our content calendar. So he goes into the content calendar and sees like, okay, what's getting published this week? He goes and finds that name, goes into Riverside. And then he's like, okay, these are the files that I need to work with. And then from there, it's off to the races. I don't know the other things that he uses to do because that's his expertise, right? Go ask him. Go ask him all the tools that he uses to do his job. I just know how our working relationship is. And then we use Slack to communicate back and forth and have conversations. You know, if he has questions or he needs assets, we do use Google Drive. So I'll upload assets to Google Drive, whether it's B-roll or images that he needs or different resources, whatever he needs to do his job well, I'll upload those into Google Drive to make that happen. So that's for DIY, right? That's a little pros and cons there. Hiring an editor, right? It costs money, but it frees up your time. For me, it wasn't even about the free time as much as it was the mental capacity, because I didn't realize how much I was stressing over editing videos early in the morning, late at night, on the weekends. And it was just like, oh my God, I can't do anything else until this freaking video is edited. And that stressed me out so much. So it's like, okay, I have been able to free up that time and mental energy to focus on earning more revenue so that I can pay Jay. Do you see how that works? Like when I freed up all this mental space and energy, it allowed for me to make money to pay my editor to where I can say, hot dang, I don't have to worry about that expense because I went and found the money for it. And now we're paying for it. And then now we can keep this cycle going because it's actually working. So that was the big pro for me with hiring an editor. The other one is access to professional expertise and shortcuts. We've already talked about that a few times. He's much better at video editing than I am. And also asking him questions about shooting, like, hey, what do you think about this shot? Or what do you think about my camera? What do you think about my audio? Like, and he's given me feedback multiple times on suggested things that we could do to up the quality of the video, even though he's never come to my house and been like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like, we've had multiple conversations over Slack, over the phone, and talk these things out. But the other thing is you still have to give them direction on your style and tone. So when I see hiring go wrong, right? Outsourcing go wrong with people that are like, oh, I'll let someone else do that. I'll just record how I want. I'll let someone else do that. Like, creatively do whatever you want. Don't do that. Do not do that, because you will be disappointed. They will be confused because they probably put their best foot forward and you don't like it. And you're like poo-pooing on their best creative work. And that's where the friction starts. So if you set the expectations up, let them know, okay, this content's going to be recorded for you a week before, not the day before, because that's the other thing is with expectations. You can't just say, okay, here's the stuff. I need it tomorrow. Thanks, bye. And then you just run away. That's not going to work. You have to set up your team for success. And in order to do that, you have to have the expectations of when things are going to be due by. When are you going to pay them? And what is it going to look like going from week to week? Is your content going to change? Is the cadence going to be different? And so on and so forth. These are things that you'll figure out in a working relationship. But I think that it's a big missed opportunity. If you try to hire someone and you don't give them clear direction, you're both going to be very, very frustrated. So pros and cons, hiring someone. And then how to vet an editor, ask for their portfolio, ask for references, see samples of their previous work. I would not work with a video editor who does not have any of those. At this point, it is very imperative that they have that, because you need to see their work. You need to see if your styles match. Maybe they're super punk rock and you're more poppy, like lighty and airy, or maybe they're like dark and brooding and you're like, I love rainbows and sunshine. Like, you need to know these things, because creatively working with someone, it's very important that they stick to your brand and don't just go and do whatever thing that really fits who they are and their personality. So very important. The other one is request references or testimonials from previous people. You could start with a test project. Like, you could say, hey, here's a clip. I just recorded myself on Zoom, or I recorded something in Riverside. Like, go create a reel from this. Or, because obviously if it's a big project, you need to pay them. I fully believe that if you're going to ask them to do a 30-minute project, like, you need to pay them. Like a 30-minute video, 20-minute video, like, you need to pay them for their services. But maybe a short 15-second reel of something that you've done previously could be really cool. The other thing is tools for editors, like finding editors, Upwork, Fiverr, or communities like ours, Podcasters Connect. You can reach out in there for references. But red flags. Okay, let's talk about red flags with editors or anybody that you outsource to. Poor communication skills. And this does not necessarily mean that you don't speak the same language, because I've worked with multiple people. I've worked on global teams and people that still speak English in other countries. Like, there could be people that I am working with here in the US, here at a point where I can literally look at them. I'm looking at them eye to eye across the table, and they still have poor communication skills. I want to make this very, very clear. Clear communication just means setting expectations, having clear response times, and just talking to people, not ghosting people. I've had people that I've hired that have ghosted me, and they don't answer phone calls, they don't answer texts, don't answer email, don't answer, just like, I'm done. Like, I can't do that. So have that clear expectation on how you're going to work with people and make sure you stick to it. And then the other red flag is lack of flexibility or unwillingness to learn your style. Red flag, you need to find someone else. And there are so many high quality video editors that it just may take you, kissing a few frogs to find that like perfect Prince Charming or princess that will work for you, like in the best way possible. So just know that that's probably part of the process. And then the last one is the pro tip for this one is always start with clear expectations. What kind of edits do you want? Are you looking for good enough? or for studio quality. Let them know where is the bar, where is the mark that they are shooting for, and help them achieve that. All right, last thing we're going to talk about, overcoming the hurdles to handing off editing. So address the emotional challenge of letting go. Kylia, we've talked about this. If there's anybody else listening and you've been like leaning into this conversation today, right? It's hard. It's hard to trust someone else, especially when it feels like this precious thing that you've been working on. But I think of it as freeing yourself to focus on other areas of growth, other places where you can monetize, you can find sponsorships, you can work on that next digital course, that digital product, that service that you've been wanting to do. So I'm such a big fan of outsourcing, but there are practical steps. Start with something small, start with something simple. Hey, do this and cut out all of my ums or my pauses. And you could have someone that edits your video and your audio too. Like, consider that as well. The other piece is creating a collaborative relationship where you're giving feedback often, but you're also receiving feedback, right? This shouldn't be like a one-way street where you're just telling someone, this is what I want to do this, do that. It should absolutely be a working relationship where you have a respect for the person that you've hired. They have a respect for you, and you are both trying to have this synergy across your brand that really brings your mission to life. That's what I would recommend everyone shoot for. And then, yeah, I think that for this, I'm looking at all the other notes that I have. I think that when it comes to letting go and when it comes to trying something new, just remember what you're doing today will always be an option in the future. So if you try outsourcing some of this stuff and you realize it doesn't work, you can go back to doing it, right? It's probably not the best solution for the whole thing, but you're going to be in a lose-lose situation if you never try and you sit there and you complain about this takes so long, this isn't good. Like, I want to quit. I want to quit. I want to quit because it's too complicated. But if you never give yourself that opportunity to try and you outsource one little tiny thing, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I have my time back. I have my energy back. I have that time in the morning that I was spending on this back. Like I could do so many other things. For me, it was getting back the weekends with my family when I was spending it editing for hours, very frustrated and overwhelmed, and saying, you know what? I'm going to let a professional handle this. And I'm so glad that I did. So again, shout out to Jay. He's incredible. But I have tons of previous podcast episodes, YouTube videos that we have done all about video editing. Like one is the truth about video podcasting. Do this before you start a podcast. Secrets to video podcasting success. What do you need to know behind the lens? And just so many more. So we'll link to all of those in the show notes for today. But today's action. If you have not joined Podcasters Connect, come over, join our community. We have monthly coaching calls, monthly audits. We are having so much fun in this brand new community. And it's a way for you to ask questions directly to me. Like, it's actually me. My team is in there as well. And we have some moderators that are helping us out, but it's me. Like, you're talking to, when you see like Crystal on there, like, it is me. I am chatting in the group. I am DMing people in the group. And it is a place for us to hang out and have so much fun, learn more about how you can elevate your podcast. So that is my call to action today. Like, lean into what you could do to outsource some of your content in 2025, but really how you could get started with video podcasting, because I think that it's a big missed opportunity if you're not willing to even try. Just give it a try is all that I'm asking. But that's all I have for you today. Like, what a juicy topic. I went way longer than I expected. But this was great. This is great. So if you have questions, I want to know, submit a fan mail question or a fan mail shout out. We do these from time to time. If you can do this on the audio only app, where if you are listening, like if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, you can click on one of those links and click on the link that says send Crystal a text message. I absolutely want to hear from you. It will also be in the audio version of this podcast on my RSS feed on YouTube. But I'm so happy that you are here. You are part of this community, and please follow or subscribe wherever you are listening and watching. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.